Beautiful. That was White as Snow. Hi, I'm Gary from learntoplaymusic.com and welcome to the Music Space, episode 14. And on episode 14, my special guest is Leon Olguin, who you just heard playing his hit, White as Snow. Leon is an arranger, a pianist, producer, living in Florida. Say hi, Leon.
Hello, or hi.
You have a choice. That's great.
I have a choice.
Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your career. 24 years as a professional musician. Can you tell us what inspired you to get started and who your influences are?
Well, to be more truthful, I've actually been a professional musician for 43 years because I got my first paying job when I was 13. After I'd been taking piano for about a year, I was hired as a church organist. Even though I wasn't really trained on the organ, I could fake it pretty well. So the church was paying me the then princely sum of $100 American a month to play the organ, which was pretty good for a 13-year-old kid in 1970. How old was I in 1972? I don't know. I'm getting too old now. My math is gone.
So you have something in common with Johann Sebastian Bach.
Yeah. Started out as a church musician, but I've been performing professionally ever since. But in 1990, that's when I opened my studio, Solar Creative Media. And so I've been working there for the last 24 years.
Fantastic. And during that time, you've produced some independent releases and published and recorded some compositions?
Yes, I've done some independent releases of my own. I've done 2 solo piano albums, and I did a Christmas album of like synthesizer and sampled arrangements and things like that. That was back in 1991. I have lost track of the number of independent artists that I've recorded and produced in my studio over the years. They've been from all over the world. I've recorded people who sang in German and Spanish and English and all different styles, even heavy metal.
Okay, and you had a big hit with the tune White as Snow, which you were playing at the beginning there. Can you tell us about that one?
Well, that's actually a contemporary Christian worship song that I wrote back in 1990, and it was published, joint published by a company that I helped start called Sound Truth Music, and then Maranatha Music, which at the time was a very well-known publisher of contemporary Christian music. They took that song and used it on, I've lost track of the number of albums that they put it on, and then many churches that wanted to do their own independent album releases were using the song. It's been published in hymnals and songbooks and different collections. It's been used all over the world in different churches. So it's been really interesting to see what has happened with it.
Okay, so obviously we're shooting this episode. You're live on your yacht at the moment. Is that correct?
No, I am not on my yacht.
You're not. But I imagine it's been quite lucrative for you, that particular bit of success.
It makes me wish I had written about 20 or 30 more, and then I could have retired.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
it's a little bit like winning a musical lottery sometimes, because you never know when a song like that is going to take off. I did really very little to promote it. The publishers did quite a bit at the time. The music business was very different in those days. You made a lot more money off of print music and off of recording.
Yeah.
And it's a little different nowadays. Most of my income from the song comes from churches paying a licensing fee in order to use it. So,
Okay. Like a royalty payment.
like a royalty payment, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, hopefully you write plenty more of those. So what sort of musical education have you had, Leon?
I have a degree in music theory that I took in 1980. I attended University of Southern California for 1 year, and then I finished my degree at Cal State University Dominguez Hills, which is just a small state college in California. And then, of course, I have many, many years of professional experience on top of that.
Okay. And how important do you think that sort of education is for a performing musician?
Well, for me, it's been very important because I use just about everything I learned studying music theory in my work as an arranger. And it also helps me to learn songs more quickly, having a basic knowledge of music theory. And it helps me remember music more easily and so on. So there's some advantages to being a fully trained musician.
Yeah, of course. So I can't see how it couldn't be a bonus in any way, really. So you're obviously a teacher as well.
That's right.
What you teach piano, obviously. What sort of thing helps you teach your students? What sort of approach do you take?
Well, most of my students, while I do teach children and have done so in the past, many of my students are, I guess you could call them late beginners or restarters. I've met a lot of people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even up into their 80s, who took some piano lessons when they were very young, and for whatever reason they quit. Maybe they did not like the songs they were playing, or they got bored, or they didn't like the teacher, but they oftentimes regret having given up their piano lessons. They wish they had continued. And so they decide, I want to pick it up again. So they gather up all their old music, they sit in front of their piano, and then they say, now what? I don't know what to do. And so very often I can help them pick up where they left off, or maybe they've decided, I don't want to play classical music, I'd rather play rock and roll, and I can show them how to use the chords and progressions and so on to play rock music or pop music or country, or to play gospel songs or hymns, anything that they want to do. I try to find out what the student really wants to learn how to play, what's their real passion in music, and help them in that direction. So while I do teach classical piano, I tend to specialize in teaching adults how to just make music, how to have fun making music again.
Yeah, that's great. They tend to keep coming for a bit longer then, don't they?
Yes,
rather,
if they
rather
enjoy what
than
they're
the
doing, they'll stick with it.
yeah, rather than do this, do that. I agree that music has to be fun. So obviously during that time of teaching, you've developed a little, or a big, whatever, theory on how to learn 24 chords in 30 minutes. That sounds very
That's right.
interesting, and that's on our blog too for anybody who'd like to have a look after or during. Um, so 24 chords in 30 minutes. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a quick way for somebody to get an idea of what the chords sound like. There's basically 24 basic chords, 12 major chords, 12 minor chords, and what I often do, and I've done this a lot in a classroom setting, this works very well. People don't even necessarily have to have a piano in front of them. I give them a paper with a keyboard printed on it, and they can kind of visualize it, and then I'll play it for them on the keyboard. So if it's somebody who has no musical background, the first thing I say is we're going to learn where middle C is. Everybody knows about middle C. And so we find middle C on the piano, and then I tell them, now we got to find all the other notes. So you can go backwards through the alphabet to B and A, and now you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, and then it just keeps repeating. That's pretty easy for people to pick up. Then we go back to middle C, And I say, now we're going to build a 3-note chord on middle C. Middle C is going to be the bottom note. We're going to skip over D. We'll add E, skip over the F, and add G. And immediately they can play a C major chord. This is one of the advantages that pianists have over guitar players, for example. You can play these chords very easily without having to develop calluses or move your hands and try to find the shapes on guitar. And the chords are all of equal difficulty. You can play a C, you can play an F major, you can play G major, and all you're really doing is just shifting your hand from one position to another. So once I teach them how to play C major, I show the students how to find a half step on the keyboard. That's the very first interval or a distance between two notes that I teach them. And basically a half step is just going to the very next key without skipping any. And so now we do the same thing. We build a chord on that. We move all 3 notes up half a step. We move this one up. We move this one up. And this top one up. And now we're playing D flat or C sharp major, you see. And it's just a process now of working their way up what we call the chromatic scale, building a major chord on every note of the chromatic scale, and there's 12 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then it starts to repeat. So this, of course, is a highly condensed version because I make sure that they're understanding what I'm doing along every step of the way. And if somebody's following the outline on your blog, they'll be able to go through it at their own pace, not at hyper speed like this. But once they've found the 12 major chords, then I take them back to C major and say, now we're going to change this from a major chord into a minor chord. All we have to do is find the middle note, which in this case is E, and now we lower it by half a step. The other 2 notes stay the same, but we change the E to an E flat, and now we have C minor. And then I make sure they can hear the difference between this and this. They have a different quality. And that's the term we use to determine if a chord is major or minor. Those are the qualities of the chord. Yeah. And then you can either take every major chord and change it to minor, or you can just use the chromatic scale again. And so I get the students to practice playing around by finding these chords and learning to play all 12 of them. And in that way they have found 24 chords, and usually in the classroom setting this takes about 25-30 minutes for me to show them all that. So it's not like they have to actually memorize 24 separate chords like a list, but all you have to remember is where's middle C and how do I build a C major chord off of that, and then what's a half step, and you just take it from there and you can reconstruct all 24 chords.
Okay, so within that half an hour they can pretty much locate any major or minor chord.
That's right. You know, and then the idea is to take that knowledge, and then I teach them also how to read a lead sheet, which is just the melody and the chords and the lyrics if it's a song with lyrics. And they don't have to read like a classical player. You know, when you're playing classical music, you've got to read the treble clef and the bass clef, and it's got to be exact. It's got to be all the right notes. It's got to be at the right speed, at the right volume, with the right interpretation. It's a very exacting thing. And of course, if somebody wants to learn that, I can teach them that, and it can be a very exhilarating experience, but it can also be very frustrating if that's not necessarily what you want to learn. And so reading a lead sheet is more of using it as a guide, because very often people are playing songs that they already kind of know, that they could even pick out the tune by ear if they had to. And so they're using the lead sheet as a guide to help them remember the tune, and then it also has the chords which they can play as well. So they can either play the chords with their left hand, or they can play just the chords while somebody is singing the tune.
Yeah.
And that's the
Okay.
basis for what we call the popular method of playing the piano. And that's, of course, what all rock and roll keyboard players and even jazz musicians, when they get into much more complex chords and so on, but it's the same basic principle. They're not reading notes like a classical musician. They're taking chords, breaking them up, playing the notes one at a time, playing scales and so on. And just by manipulating those basic elements, they're able to create music.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you make lesson time a bit of fun as opposed to the Gestapo version.
Well, what I really try to do is to hand the tools for making music to the students and say, now you must employ these tools to construct whatever it is that strikes your fancy. Because if you're playing a popular song, or if you're playing a hymn or a gospel song or whatever, there's no right way to play it. You can create your own version of it. You can even change the chords if you find other chords that you like, and that just comes from trial and error and just having fun with it.
Yeah. So are you performing at all at the moment, Leon? What sort of projects do you have apart from
Well,
your
right
teaching?
now I'm working primarily with a jazz singer. Her name is Sybil Gage. In fact, people can look her up at Sybil Sings, SYBIL, SybilSings.com. And in fact, if you go to her site, she has several YouTube videos readily available, and you'll see me in quite a few of them. Because very often we do shows where I'm the accompanist and she's the singer. She's the one that always tells me at the beginning of a show, I'm scared.
Oh,
And then I tell
okay.
her, what have you got to be scared of? I'm playing for you.
That's
And then she's still scared. But once she
and
gets
she's
going, she is a dynamic, charismatic performer. And so a lot of what we do is not necessarily background music in a lounge setting, but it's an actual show. It's a dinner show.
okay.
So it can be very exciting. It's hard work for me because sometimes I'm the whole band.
Yeah.
But it's a great challenge because she's always wanting to learn new songs. And she never picks songs that I think, why is she doing that? They're always great songs, a lot of fun to play, and she
Okay.
gets a great reaction from the audience.
Give us an idea of the repertoire.
Well, for example, I could play, she does a song called Ain't Got No Room for the Blues, and it starts out like, this is my introduction. You know, it's not exactly subtle, but it's a lot of fun to play.
Scott Joplin style.
It's, yeah, I play a little Scott Joplin style. You might play some Nolans kind of thing. Kind of hard to play sideways like that, but we do Nolans. We even do some straight jazz, although I'm not really a jazz pianist, but I can fake it. And we even do some pop songs. Occasionally she'll play Me and Bobby McGee, the old Janis Joplin song.
Yeah.
And I play it as if Elton John were playing it. You kind of have to imagine that.
The Waylon Jennings tune, is that correct? I think.
Chris Christopherson wrote it.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And
I was
then,
close.
of course, everybody knows Janis Joplin's version, but we do the Sybil Gage version. It's hard to do it without her, of course. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff. And then I also get a chance every now and again to play with my wife, Cheryl
That was
Page.
my next question. Yes, who was.
And so I always joke around and say, I only work with two singers. That's Page and Gage. Cheryl Page and Sybil Gage. And playing
Right.
for Cheryl is much different because, of course, she is a self-contained musician, doesn't necessarily need me to play with her. And so when I'm playing for her, she's playing guitar, as you know, and I have to play very delicately on top of what she's doing and kind of decorate it and support it. But I have to be very careful not to overwhelm what she's doing.
Yeah,
So it's a different kind of challenge.
Or you end up on the couch.
Yeah, no, I would not end up on the couch. I would just end up back in the audience, not getting to play for her anymore. But that's a different kind of challenge that I enjoy very much. And of course, there's that special feeling about it because it is my wife. And in fact, we're going to be celebrating our 33rd anniversary in 2 days. This coming Friday. We'll have been
Fantastic.
married for 33 years. So she's managed to put up with being married to a musician. But then again, so have I. So I
That's
guess
right. It
that
makes
makes
it
us
easier,
equal.
doesn't it? It does make it
Yeah,
easier.
makes it
Congratulations
easier.
to the two of you.
And also, it's good that one of us plays guitar and the other plays piano, because otherwise we'd be fighting over the guitar or the piano.
That's right. My solo. Yeah.
No.
So, what about your recording projects, Leon? Have you got anything happening there?
Well, I'm trying to think what I've been working on recently. I'm doing some backing tracks for an artist from Switzerland. He's been living over there, I don't know, what, about 10 years now. And he just sends me an MP3 of a rough demo, and I'll create like this big, lush backing track for him and send it back to him in Switzerland, and he'll add his vocals over there. And he sings kind of in an old, he sounds like one of the lost member of the Four Seasons with Frankie Valli. He has that real gritty, totally American sound to his voice. I should have had an example of his work to play for you, but I've worked on every style there is. About a year ago, I finished an album with an R&B artist where I co-wrote the songs with her. The biggest project that I did this year was an album of standards for a singer from the area. Her name is Suzanne Baker, and she sang songs like Fever and what were some of the other ones she did? Slow Boat to China, and I have so many songs going through my brain sometimes it's hard to go back in my memory and remember. But that was fun because that was something that she had been wanting to do for years, and finally got a chance to record these songs that she's always loved and has sung for many people. She had a wonderful voice. So I was able to do full big band and orchestral arrangements for her using samples and writing out all the parts myself. So that was a great deal of fun.
Great. And did you record that all at your home studio there?
All done right here where I am sitting. We did send the tracks up to a gentleman in New York. His name is Don Moffat. He has a service that he calls Just-in-Time Recordings. He's a drummer. And so I would send him some of the basic tracks with just a click track or a drum loop just to show him the tempo. And then he would erase that and add his own drum parts. He'd record like 8 tracks of drums and then send it back to me, and I would mix it here. And that worked very, very well. He was excellent New York, full-time New York musician. He did a wonderful job with that project, and would not hesitate to use him again on the future projects.
Great. You can't beat a real drummer, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've tried to beat a few, but
I mean, depending on the kind of music, I can fake it. I have a lot of good drum loops and drum programs and wonderful samples, but I love live players, and I bring them in whenever I can. Fortunately, I have a guitarist who is available to me most of the time. She does some really good work, especially playing lead guitar sometimes. You'd be amazed. You didn't really get to hear her do that when she was on your show, but she does. She gets out the old Charvel or the Gibson and plays some pretty cool stuff on electric guitar. I also have a gentleman who comes in to play fiddle, and we have guys who play pedal steel and backing vocalists. So it's not just me in here fiddling around with a bunch of equipment. I do bring in some very good musicians from time to time, depending on the project.
You have a community at your disposal by the sounds of it.
Well, we've been here long enough that we've gotten to know many of the best players in town, and especially the ones who are able to translate their expertise from live performance into the studio.
Yeah.
We have had an experience where some of them are really great live, but they get into the studio and they have what we call red light syndrome. The recording light comes on and they freeze up, or they play too conservatively, or they're not comfortable. Some of them are able to overcome that after a while with experience and become proficient studio musicians. Others just prefer the lure of the live stage, and they gravitate back towards that, and that's okay too.
And there are others that that are on the other end of the spectrum that are great studio performers, but perhaps not quite so dynamic live.
That's true. Oddly enough, we don't have too many of those. Just about everybody that we've used in the studio is also an excellent live performer.
Okay.
Which you have to be in this particular area here in Central Florida if you want to make a living as a musician. you have to be very diversified. So I perform, I record, I write music, I write about music, and I do a lot of different things in order to keep going.
Yeah, yeah, very similar here in Adelaide. To make a living as a musician, you need to be able to play as many styles as possible, as many instruments, and contribute in as many ways as you can as a performing musician and also as a recording musician.
Right.
That's for sure, Leon. So it sounds to me like things are similar all around the world. Everybody's doing as much as they can to survive doing what they love. So let's
That's
keep
right.
holding the flame. Huh? So I think we're probably ready for some questions with Ben. Question time with Ben.
All right.
First, we have a question from Tom, who asks, are there any challenges in recording with different languages or music styles?
Challenges in recording different languages?
And music styles.
As long as they know what they're singing, I can handle the music part of it. I mean, I do speak a little Spanish, so when I've done Spanish language albums, I'm kind of pretty much able to tell what they're saying. But music is music, and I've recorded people singing in Italian, Spanish, German. Doesn't really make much difference as long as I can hear the notes, and I got to trust them, of course, that they're pronouncing it correctly. But of course, if they're singing in that language, they're obviously extremely familiar with it, or they're native speakers of that language.
Yeah, and music is a universal language, isn't it? So
it is, yeah. And most of the time, if there's a specific musical concept or an arrangement idea, I'm working with a co-producer most of the time on these type of projects, and so they speak English. So, for example, the Spanish language albums that I've done, the producer who's working with me also speaks English and is able to translate, as it were, and say, now the artist wants it to sound like this, or they may have a song that they want me to listen to give me an idea of the arrangement that they're looking for. So language problems usually don't crop up that much. It's been a while since I've done a foreign language project anyway. Just about everything I do nowadays is in English.
We have a question from Rob, who asks, what is more important in your opinion, music education or music experience, or are they equally as important?
Could you repeat that for me? I couldn't quite hear him.
What is more important in your opinion, music education or music experience?
Music as vocation?
Music education or music experience, which one would you think was most important or more important?
I don't think you can put one above the other, although there are people who are primarily self-taught musicians, and they've gone a long way, and they've done some amazing things with very little technical knowledge. But I even tell these people, it wouldn't hurt you to learn how to read music. It wouldn't hurt you to learn basic keyboard, a little bit of music theory. There is a myth going around amongst some musicians that if I were to become more educated musically, that somehow it would hurt my creativity. I maintain that it would not hurt, but it would expand your creativity. You would be less likely to write yourself into a corner or be hunting around for something that sounds good. You would begin to write more with purpose, knowing exactly where you're going and what you're doing, what you're playing and why you're playing it, rather than hunting around hoping to find something. And so they're both very important. I mean, I have a thorough music education, but I didn't become a real professional musician until I'd been out there for many years playing live and doing different things. I didn't learn really how to be a teacher until I was out there teaching. You have all this knowledge in your mind, and when you actually get in front of a group of students, or you're sitting down in front of one student and you realize, I've got to transmit these concepts in a way that is understandable and clear, whew, you learn very quickly what works and what doesn't work. So I apologize to all my students who were my guinea pigs out there and didn't know what the heck I was talking about when I first started out. But you learn very quickly how to communicate these things.
Well, that's it. Music is a language, and obviously the better you can communicate that language, the better you will be understood. So having a good knowledge of theory can only be a bonus to yourself, especially if you want to share your concepts with other musicians.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. Ben.
We have a question from Laurie who asks, what benefits can older people have from learning music?
What benefits do older people have?
What benefits would older people have from learning music?
Oh, well, it's been well proven that learning a new skill, no matter what age you might be, it improves the workings of your brain. It keeps your mind stimulated. I think it's good for somebody to continue to learn whatever they're interested in. They may want to learn how to paint. They may want to learn how to garden. They may want to learn how to water ski. In music, of course, it's been shown that people who play music, something happens in their mind. It's like there's more synapses being formed up there or something. I'm not a brain specialist, but I, of course, have known many musicians in my life, and many of them keep going well into their 70s, sometimes even into their 80s, and their minds are as sharp as anything, and they continue to learn and grow, because music is one of those things that you can never completely exhaust. I'm still learning. People might look at me and go, well, you've been a professional for so long, you must know everything. The older I get, the less I know. The more I want to learn, because I want my mind to continue to be active when I'm getting into my 70s and 80s.
We have a question from Frank who asks, how many notes up or down is a half step? Are the black notes included in this?
Did you hear that, Leon?
I didn't quite hear.
How many notes is a half step? How many notes up or down is a half step?
Oh, well, as I mentioned briefly before, a half step is basically you start on any key. Like if you start on middle C, it's the very next key, either going up or down, without skipping it.
That's black
in this case, you're going to go to the next key, which happens to be a black key.
Yeah.
And in music, you can call that either C sharp. When a note is sharp, that means it's been raised half a step, or you can call it D flat, because if you start on D and go down half a step, you wind up on the same key. So all the black keys actually have two names. So this one can be called C sharp or D flat. So that's a half step. It's just basically the shortest distance between two keys. And there's, of course, a couple of places on the keyboard, several places, where you have two white keys next to each other. So even though there's no black key in the middle, that's still a half step. So you're going from, for example, B to C is a half step, and E to F. Those are half steps as well.
So all the white notes on the piano are pure notes, and all the black ones are sharps and flats.
Right. Yeah, they just, you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but then you also have A sharp and A flat and B sharp and B flat and so on.
Yeah. Which are our black notes.
Right.
And we have one last question from Jasmine, who asks, if I want to learn an instrument such as guitar, can I apply this same half-step technique?
Yes, you can apply them. I've encouraged, in fact, I have a posting coming out on my blog tomorrow about why guitarists should learn piano. And Cheryl is sitting here in the room here with me, and she's smiling. And the reason I say that is because you can transfer the concepts of music theory off of the keyboard back to the guitar. As you learn how chords relate to each other, as you learn how chord progressions work, as you learn how to play by ear, you can take those concepts and bring them back to the guitar. So I encourage guitar players to learn how to read guitar music, if you can. Learn how to read the notation and play the notes on the guitar. What makes it a little more complex for a guitar player is there's more than one way to play many of the notes. That's why I encourage guitarists to learn keyboard, because it's a lot simpler at first. When you play C, there's only one way to play it on a piano. You can't do it any other way. You've got to hit that key. But on guitar, if you want to play that same note, there's several different ways to play it. So that can complicate things a little bit. So if you're a guitar player, you can take the concepts you learn about music theory, you can learn those concepts more easily basing them on the keyboard, and then you can take those concepts back and transfer them to the guitar.
Yep.
I hope that makes sense.
That applies to every musical instrument too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're hearing
we're
a
not
guy
limited at all.
soloing on saxophone over a set of chord changes, he's learned music theory as well. He knows his chords, he knows his scales, he knows where the notes he's playing fit with the chords that are being played by the other instruments. And the only way he can know is that by having a basic knowledge of music theory and how chords work together and melodies and scales and so on.
That's right. So yeah, any instrument at all. So that's pretty much about wrapped up the show. It's been great to have you on, Leon, and we'll have you back again in the near future, I imagine. That'd be great.
Great.
So thank you once again, and maybe you can play a little bit at the end of the show when I'm finished. So thanks for watching, everybody. Next week, our special guest will be Peter Gelling, who returns again, our blues man. And we're going to, you can continue the conversation on the blog and check out our email at musicspace@learntoplaymusic.com. And we'll see you all next week, same time, same place on the Music Space. Bye for now. Take it away, Leon.
All right.